Hey everyone, let me tell you a story about how I met my wife, Lena, almost 15 years ago. It all started with a wild party at my folks' farm. My parents were out of town, so I threw a get-together for some friends. You know how it goes, college kids, good times, and a little too much fun. One of my cousins, Terry, well, let's just say he was having a really good time, and by good time, I mean completely wasted. Now, Terry wasn't exactly known for his good judgment, especially after a few beers. Instead of staying at the farm and sleeping it off, he decided to try and walk 5 miles home. I managed to snag his truck keys, but he thought he was smarter than me. The idiot actually ran out the front door, thinking he could make it. I let him go because, sometimes you gotta let people make their own mistakes. Turns out, this cute little girl named Lena found him about a mile away, crawling through a ditch. She was just heading to the mailbox to get her family's mail when she saw him, totally passed out. Talk about a first impression. So, Lena, being a good Samaritan, dragged him to her house. She even had to deal with her dad, a real strict guy, about the whole thing. Needless to say, it wasn't exactly a smooth ride for Terry. My aunt, my dad's sister, had to clean up after him because he puked more than once. Terry's little stunt didn't go unnoticed, and guess who got the blame? You got it, me. My parents lost all trust in me. They thought I was the bad influence. No matter what I said, they believed the worst. My aunt, she went completely overboard. She spun it into the biggest tragedy since Jesus Christ was crucified. They absolutely shredded me. My aunt was convinced I'd ruined Terry, a choir boy who used to sing like an angel in church. She didn't know the real story of Terry's mischief. You can't argue with someone blinded by their faith. I just had to grin and bear it. The whole ordeal taught me something valuable at a young age. Truth doesn't always matter. What people believe is what truly counts. From then on, I changed my approach to everyone I knew. My dad even said I was old before my time because I carried myself differently. Then, this girl Lena, I'd never met before, walked up to me in the hallway right before class after lunch and hit me with this. I hear you throw some wild parties at your folks' farm, and that there are half-naked girls running around. Are you so irresponsible that you let your friends leave when they can't even walk 10 feet? Who are you? I asked, and what in the world are you talking about? My name is Lena LeBlanc, and I found one of your party guests crawling in a ditch near my house because he couldn't even stand up. I thought to myself, if she only knew how far from the truth she was, she'd realize how clueless she was. But I kept my mouth shut. There's no sense arguing with someone who already believes the wrong thing. It's not as bad as you're making it sound, I said, taking in her hot bod. But if you want to volunteer to be one of the girls next time we have a Saturday night party, I'm open to it. She blushed, all flustered. You don't think I'm that kind of girl, do you? Nah, probably not, but I wish you were, I said. My mouth is saying one thing, but my eyes and body language are telling you a different story. Jet King, you're such a jerk, she said, her cheeks burning red. Yeah, but the horse is gonna get ridden anyway, I said. Let me know when your game's on. She slapped me hard across the face and stormed off, but I could see a little smirk on her face before her slap landed. I just stood there, laughing. I knew my reputation was cemented that year. She doesn't have a clue, does she? My cousin Terry, who'd witnessed the whole thing, said. Nope, I said. What the heck did you tell her, anyway? How the hell should I know, you idiot? He said. You're the one who decided to play some bogus poker with real money after we smoked a joint. I started laughing because my cousin Terry had no idea I'd stacked the deck. We headed to our first class after that. From that moment, the game between Lena and me was on. I played Lena every damn chance I got to get under her skin. Every time I saw her in public, I made sure everyone who could see us knew I was undressing her with my eyes. It was so obvious that one of her friends even started playing Hungry Eyes on their cell phone when she saw me. To me, it was a little payback for her slapping me. Okay, I was kind of a jerk, but I enjoyed it. Besides, she had a body that could stop traffic. It radiated that southern charm in a way that wasn't just me wanting her. I was just dumb enough to admit it. If one of her friends questioned what I was doing, I'd answer honestly. I like her, but Lena told me we'd be together when hell freezes over, and until that happens, I better respect her wishes. It just pissed Lena off even more, because they wanted to know what I'd done to make that happen. The reaction she got when she explained things to them was either laughter about what happened or teasing her about her reaction. Lena LeBlanc, to me, was a hot girl. She was from the deep south, and some hurricane damage had forced her family to move to the center of the flyover country. She was a Cajun redhead with a body that I dreamed about at night. She was about 5'6". She was a sweet, toned girl with curves in all the right places. Get her riled up outside of school and she could cuss in Cajun French a mile a minute. Okay, I'll admit it, I enjoyed watching her get mad when her friends told her about what I was doing. The smirk on my face watching her blush because of the comments about our current situation made it all the more clear that I liked it. I added to it when she wore a low-cut halter top that showed off her cleavage by letting out a long, hungry wolf whistle. When that whistle echoed in the hallway, everyone knew Lena was wearing something that made her look smoking hot. When every guy in school paid attention to her for the rest of the day. I didn't know if she liked the attention, but I figured it was all in good fun. I don't know how many times I caught myself staring at her adorable horseshoe-shaped butt. With her 36 C's, her tiny waist, and 34 hips, I could see myself wrapped around her waist. There wasn't a single sex act one could think of that I wouldn't consider doing with her. Sometimes I'd dream about taking her up to the hayloft in my parents' barn. Like most teenage boys, she was someone I fantasized about. I never really expected anything to come of it because her family was rich and mine was dirt poor. She had the spirit of an untamed wild horse, if you will. She could be passive, aggressive, or dominant depending on her mood. The man who got her would have to have the patience of Job, because it would take that long just to understand her before you could even develop a plan that might work to get inside her clothes. The more I studied her, the more I knew what a complex person she was. That's how much her hot little body and personality got to me. If any woman could make me lose my marbles, it would be her. There were times when she'd catch me looking when she thought no one was paying attention, and she'd do something to tease me. We were both deliberately playing a game to frustrate the other. It took nearly the entire school year before we both realized how well that game worked. Everyone knew I was a bad boy, and in my eyes, nothing was better than what Lena had to offer. One time, she caught me looking at 3 of her friends, and she bent over and wiggled her butt in my direction while laughing. Apparently, her mama had told her that men who like asses become the most loyal husbands in the long run. She made the mistake of confiding that to Karen, and before long, the whole school believed it was true. We both ended up graduating high school with honors. She was valedictorian, I was salutatorian. She thought if they knew what I did outside of school, I wouldn't be considered. So we had just been practicing for our parts in the graduation ceremony for a month on stage in the auditorium. I had to be there in case she got sick. I knew, no matter what, she would show up, even if it was out of spite. No way would she let me win by default. We both got big educational grants. Our senior prom was that Saturday. I planned on starting classes at Southeast Missouri State University in the fall to start getting my MB in agricultural sciences. As we walked off the stage through the back stairwell that led to the hallway, I put my arm around her soft, round butt and whispered in her ear, "When are you going to let me touch that?" She spun around and slapped me, saying, "When hell freezes over, you jerk." With nothing to lose and no witnesses around, out of frustration I got a little aggressive. I pulled her body close to mine, leaning in while looking into her eyes. At first she resisted me, but my determination overcame her. I had this one chance to take a gamble, and I was going to take it. Her eyes widened as I brought my mouth to hers and passionately gave her a deep, long French kiss. I made sure that when my tongue entered her mouth, I was taking possession of it like it was mine. I put all the passion and desire I could muster into it, thinking if I had to pay for this, I was going to get my money's worth. If this was my first and last kiss with her, I was going to make sure it was memorable. After tasting what I'd been craving for so long, I finally let her go in a way that let her know exactly how I felt about her. Her blue eyes showed a mix of passion, frustration, and anger, so I was expecting a violent reaction. Her response instead startled me. She shoved me hard against the wall and pressed herself tightly against me. She was as aggressive as I was. To me, that was totally hot. I immediately got hard and pressed myself against her as we gave into another deep, long kiss. I could see myself getting lost in this hot chick, and that scared me. Lena showed me that she could match me when she needed to. She could be a handful. I was shocked when she used her right hand to grasp my crotch. I guess she was getting a feel for the size of the package I had. To show how demanding she could be, she held onto it just enough to say I was in control, but not enough to hurt. I've been waiting almost the whole school year for you to stop talking and do something, Jet King, Lena said. I'm glad you finally decided to be a man. Good to hear that, I said. I wish you'd told me that a few months ago. Now can you loosen your grip? We're not over until I say we're exclusive, Lena said adamantly. Okay, you're the only one I've had my eyes on since you slapped me, I said. I grinned and brought my lips back to hers. This time I showed my tenderness by kissing her as gently and slowly as I could. My two hands settled firmly on her soft cheeks. It felt like I was holding onto a piece of heaven. Our kisses were both demanding and exploratory at the same time. Lena started exploring my lean frame. As we finally broke away from the stairwell, after a few minutes, because we both thought we heard something, we were holding hands. We both knew our relationship with each other had just taken a huge step forward. If we had been anywhere else but school, I believe that to this day we would have been so aroused and hot for each other in that moment that we couldn't have stopped. The attraction we had for each other throughout the school year had built up to a fever pitch. Everyone who saw us coming out knew something had happened because they saw my hard-on sticking out of my pants and the smiles on our faces. We later found out we were the subject of hallway gossip all day. It's funny because we hadn't really dated that much that year. It seemed like we were both waiting on each other. In the end, I waited for her at the end of the day to walk to the front of the school to catch the school bus. She was walking with her best friend when she saw me. It was pure joy seeing her eyes light up when she looked at me. Without saying a word, she handed me her textbooks and said, "Can we stop by Dairy Queen for a milkshake before you drop me off?" "You and Jet," Flat Karen said in amazement. "When did you two finally admit your interest in each other?" If you've ever seen Flat Karen, you'd know what the kids meant when they called her the carpenter's dream because she was straight as a board and never got nailed. Sometimes we'd say she was the pirate's treasure because she became a sunken chest. "I'll call you tonight and explain everything," Lena said as we walked hand in hand towards my Jeep Cherokee Sport. We stopped at the Dairy Queen just above the police station on the main road through town. She wanted a blizzard and I wanted a regular shake, so I ordered the biggest sizes they had. We went to the city park and sat at one of their picnic tables and started getting to know each other. It was about 6 in the evening when I dropped her off at her parents' place. Her mom saw me pull up and opened the door for her. Her dad came to the door and sized me up when I walked in to ask for permission to take his daughter to prom on Saturday night. I guess my actions shocked him because he seemed uncertain of how to react. Lena told me later that he was shocked to see someone our age willing to be so respectful. He finally agreed and offered to shake my hand. I learned later that to him, showing respect spoke volumes about how I was raised. When I asked him for his daughter's hand many years later, he didn't have a major issue as long as I agreed to his prenuptial agreement. After Lena went into her parents' house, I got in my truck and drove to my folks' farm. I couldn't believe I'd finally kissed the girl of my dreams. My parents must have figured out right away that something had changed in my life. It was unusual for me to be late getting home from school, so, of course, I had to answer my mom's questions about why I was so late. I just said I'd gotten into a good conversation. My dad, in a private moment, said with a grin, "Who is she and what's her name?" "A redhead that I'm taking to prom on Saturday," I explained. I asked her tonight why I was so late. From that day forward, Lena and I were inseparable. It was Saturday, the day my folks went into town. I was up in the hayloft getting ready to move some bales of hay after I'd cleaned out 4 stalls with the help of the front end loader on the tractor. I did this once a month, usually on the first Saturday of the month. The horses were locked in the pasture. I had moved the necessary things to the edge of the loft and was just throwing 2 down to spread out on the stall floor when I heard Lena calling for me. "I'm up here," I said. "I still have 14 more bales to throw down before I come down." I started throwing them over the edge as fast as I could and was getting ready to climb down when I saw Lena's head pop up from the floor. I walked over to greet her as she finished climbing up. It was funny to see how much flat space there was among the bales of hay. A moment later, we were lying wrapped around each other on each brown ears of hay. Our mouths were locked together while our hands explored each other's bodies. She was just as eager to pick up where we left off on the stairs as I was. Before long, she'd pulled my t-shirt off, and I'd just gotten her buttons undone on her blouse, looking forward to touching her beautiful breasts when we got interrupted. Lena and I probably would have gotten carried away if we hadn't heard my parents honking their horn. But I realized my parents were trying to get my attention. As we headed down the stairs, they'd pulled up near the stalls. Lena and I started spreading hay in the stalls as fast as we could. My folks saw us throwing hay at each other and laughing. Curiosity led my parents to the stalls. They were just curious enough to come out to the barn when they saw an unfamiliar vehicle in the yard while I wasn't around. They were quite surprised to see the visitor to the farm was a lovely girl about my age. It was interesting to see the surprise on my parents' faces when I introduced Lena to them as my girlfriend. I told them that as soon as I got the bedding spread out on the floor, I'd saddle up and take her for a ride. My mom said, "Before we do that, let's have lunch." So Lena volunteered to help her, so they headed back to the house. "That was a close one, Jet," my dad said. "I couldn't prove anything else was going on. Lena seems to be a good one, just like your mom at that age. Don't do anything to ruin this new relationship just because she seems worth keeping. If you're considering taking her to the altar before doing so, make sure she's good enough to be your children's mother." My dad was a practical man. He called things as he saw them. He pointed out some important thoughts in his own way, like there are always consequences for our actions. So that's when I knew my dad always had a thing for redheads. Dad helped me finish getting the 4 stalls ready before going into the barn. So by the time we got back to the house, my mom and Lena were well on their way to becoming friends. After lunch, we went riding and covered about 50 miles. With the horses tied to a low-hanging branch, we both got some fresh patches of grass as we leaned against the tree by the pool that fed from where we'd been earlier in the day. It was about 5 in the evening when she left to get ready for the school prom. At the prom that night, my cousin Terry overheard Lena telling Flat Karen that it was my sweet and gentle nature that made her attracted to me. Even though we had been teasing and taunting each other, we'd never acted on it. "I like guys who can control their temper, and Jet always manages to do that," she explained to Karen and my cousin Terry. "Jet can be aggressive when he needs to be, as I've learned," Lena said. "From what I've learned about him, his passive nature guides him in everything he does. But when he sets his mind to something, no one can stop him. He proved that by waiting for me like I was the only one." His cousin Terry told me that when he speaks with authority, most people think he's talking in anger, Karen said, because he has a naturally loud and strong voice. So he's had to train himself to lower his voice over the years. "I'll do anything for Jet," Terry said, "just like he did for me. Make him mad and you'll learn the hard way that you underestimated him. More than a few guys here have gone up against him and ended up flat on their backs after he was done with them." When I picked her up for prom, her parents were surprised when I brought her a corsage because it wasn't a special event. They remarked that it was the most beautiful corsage they'd ever seen. I explained that I'd made it from some of the plants at a small nursery that my dad and I started on the farm. "I made it in neutral colors so it would match anything," I said. They seemed very impressed by that. Wow, she looked smoking hot wearing a white, tight-fitting summer dress that showed off her beautiful curves. The dress was so short that it barely covered her underwear. She was well endowed in the breast department, and with the dress cut so low, her cleavage was on full display, which excited me. All night, every time I looked at her, I wondered what it would feel like if my heart unslid into the natural mold of her breasts. Every slow dance, for crying out loud, she was grinding on me. More than once I had to go to the bathroom just to reposition a certain part of my body because she had me hard all night. There was no doubt for anyone present that we were now a couple. Yeah, to me she was a tease, and she knew it. I guess she was getting back at me that night for what we'd done to each other all school year. By the end of summer, hanging out in the hayloft became a regular thing for us. My mom and I had a very long talk after she found my stash of condom I had hidden behind the dresser drawer. That's when she decided to have a very long talk with the woman she hoped would be her future daughter-in-law. I should have figured out what she was talking about because shortly after that, Lena informed me she was on the pill. My mom got in her 2 cents one night during dinner when she said, "The horses seem to be enjoying the stalls a lot more lately, and they're also getting a little more active in the pasture. I wonder if it's because the hay smells a little different." I nearly choked on my food and started coughing. My dad looked up and said, "Did I miss something?" My father had seen my interest in gardening from when I was a kid and encouraged me to grow it. With his guidance, we turned 20 of the 250 acres of our farm into a Christmas tree farm. We'd bought saplings on the cheap by getting grants for reforestation after researching what types were best for the Christmas market. Every spring, we'd spend a whole week planting new batches of seedlings for the product down the line. For my dad and me, it was bonding time. About 2 weeks before planting, we would plow the area to start getting it ready. Depending on the weather, we'd do this 3 or 4 times before leveling the area. This made planting quick and easy. As a result, we started promoting the first crop ready to sell the following season. We had about 400 trees about 8 feet tall. The only thing left we had to do was trim them to make them perfect for retail customers. We even figured out how to brand them so customers knew where they came from. In 6th grade, my dad recognized my interest in gardening that if I got into this thing big time, we'd have to figure out a way to supplement topsoil. The town of Jackson and my dad made a deal where they'd bring all the yard waste they collected to an area we had set aside to produce topsoil in bulk. Our neighboring town, Cape Girardeau, soon made the same deal because of the convenience, and it saved them a lot of money. At least twice a month from the time I was a kid, I'd spend 1 or 2 days just crushing branches and other things into mulch that we could then filter through large screens to separate out any non-biodegradable things that had to be burned in oil drums. The ash from those items got spread along the boundaries of the property because we wanted the finished product to be as pure as possible. When the compost pile reached a certain size, we'd add chemicals to encourage decomposition and keep it as moist as possible. So once or twice a month, we'd turn the compost pile to make sure air got mixed in to keep it loose. Local contractors soon learned they were allowed to dump their excess clean dirt with us with no tipping fees. Most of it was Missouri red clay. Using bulk chemicals designed to accelerate decomposition, we'd mix that dirt with the biodegradable organic mulch that we created. Over time, that growing part of our business took up quite a few acres. The key was to keep the soil aerated and moist. What we didn't expect was some of the donated dirt would be used to level the ground where we built a greenhouse after we excavated some of the topsoil. It took us 18 months to turn worthless dirt, good only for bricks, into high-quality topsoil. We used it as liner for new plants in the greenhouse and sold some directly to the retail market in 10-pound bags. In our first 3 years, we made enough profit to build 2 large, glass-enclosed greenhouses that were heated during the winter by natural gas heaters. Both were filled with flowers growing for delivery to local wholesalers as needed. Using multiple PCP pipes and expandable hoses, we designed an automated watering system hanging from above. We used the same principles when watering our crops. Excess water was collected by a drainage system that my dad had built into the concrete floors and brought back for reuse. That way, any nutrients lost from the daily watering were retained for reuse with 50% fresh water added. We found this to be a very cost-effective way to cut expenses, and it saved us from needing a holding pond for any surplus nutrients in the water. During the summer, we built 4 more greenhouses for growing white and red poinsettias for the Christmas season, bringing our total to 10 greenhouses. My dad figured that with the money we'd made working together, I could graduate college without having to go into debt. I still remember the first time Lena saw our operation. It helped her understand why I had chosen this field for my career. My dad told her that my inquisitive nature is what helped bring the business to success. Jack kept asking questions, my dad said. That made me think. After discussing it with my wife and getting her approval, the family moved forward. Now it has become our primary source of income and has steady growth. What was the farm used for before this place was formed? Lena asked. Cattle, my dad explained. You know, with market fluctuations, prices can be good or bad depending on the wholesale price. By the time I graduated college, we had 22 greenhouses, each 240 feet long, 40 feet wide, and 9 feet tall. We shipped high-end, organic produce weekly. Our customers wanted more, so we expanded again. 2 of our greenhouses grew leaf lettuce for a grocery store chain, 2 grew spinach, and 2 grew English cucumbers. We had 20 employees and were still growing. Our produce was grown without chemicals, marketed as organic, and commanded a higher purchase price from wholesalers. As a result, we did very well financially. As expected, I joined the family business and worked full-time. Lena became a family nurse practitioner and joined a group associated with Southeast Missouri Hospital. A week after she got her license, I proposed. 3 months later, we got married in a hurry because she was pregnant with our daughter. Our 2 sons were born a year apart after that. Since we got married, Lena was doted on by both my dad and my mom. They felt the sun rose and set on her. So my mom was overjoyed to become a grandmother and become our babysitter. Our kids gave her a new and important purpose in life. To this day, the kids reflect the moral values and standards she helped instill in them. We were just celebrating our 14th anniversary when my cousin Terry and his wife Karen pulled me aside at a family barbecue. They couldn't help but notice that Lena seemed to be in control of our relationship because I was too passive and complacent. Apparently, a lot of our mutual friends had started to worry about our future as a couple. "The way Lena treats you sometimes, Jet," Karen said. "It seems like she's treating you like a second-class citizen and has been riding you until she finds what she's looking for." "Let's just say it straight, cuz," Terry said. "Lena might say she still loves you, but all of us believe she's lost all respect for you as a man. She's got that attitude of a fed-up mama who's just had enough, even with you." I was about to defend her, like any husband should when confronted with this kind of thing, but my cousin and his wife stopped me. "Jet, Lena constantly complains about things you're not doing. It's like she makes a mountain out of every molehill," Karen said. "You don't argue or fight? You've lowered your voice so much she can't hear you anymore. You're seeing her complain and get angry because you feel she's nagging. It's led to you no longer listening to what she's saying. You've done more to update and modernize your business than you've done in your marriage." "Your marriage isn't an equal partnership because Lena leads and you follow," Terry said. "Lena is using your gentleness and personality to enhance her dominance over you, and you don't realize it. You're just too blind to see it." "You guys are both pushing each other away," Terry said. "You work long hours because you don't want to go home, but you don't want to admit it. Lena is looking for excuses to do the same. Some of our mutual friends have reason to believe she has developed a romantic interest outside the marriage." I was in the middle of doing something on the flat-top grill to prepare for dinner when Lena told me to go get something. I was seriously thinking about what Terry and Karen said. Looking back at Lena and my marriage, I finally came to the conclusion that in many ways, they were right. After hearing my cousin and his wife loud and clear, I said, "You don't see I'm busy, so why don't you just get it yourself or tell one of the kids to get it? You've been treating me like your servant for too long. Honestly, I'm tired of being your doormat." The stunned look on my wife's face said it all. Finally, Lena heard the voice she thought was gone. Everyone within earshot fell silent because of my anger. Lena turned around and went to the house to get it herself, the first time in a long time that she felt defeated. "Dad, what's wrong with you?" Luna, my 13-year-old daughter, asked. "I'm at my wit's end with feeling like I'm being treated like a servant by your mom," I answered in a way everyone could hear. "If your mom can't change how she thinks about me, there are going to be some rough months coming for our family." Everyone in attendance was newly awakened. I realized that for most of our marriage, I'd turned a blind eye because to me it wasn't worth fighting. I'd done it by not making it easy for my wife to walk all over me like I was a doormat. That night, Lena and I had a huge blowout fight. I admit it was long overdue. As a result, I slept on the couch that night. "Near the end of the movie," Lena said, "you just don't know how lucky you are." That's when I blew up. We were arguing outside so the kids couldn't hear. I grabbed Lena in a fit of rage, flipped her over my knee and spanked her like I still did with my kids when they misbehaved. She went into the bedroom in tears with a very red behind and locked the door so I couldn't get in. To say Lena tiptoed around me the next morning would be an understatement. Lena was in shock, stepping into a new reality. When my wife and the kids left the house the next morning, I went back to the large office building built by the greenhouses just to see what I could find. The reason I did this was when I was on the couch trying to figure out when our marriage started changing, I realized it had happened 8 years ago, just a few months after my mom passed away. After searching all through her bedroom, I found a bracelet with a number of small charms on it. The problem was they were all made individually out of 18-karat gold, and I hadn't bought it for her. The charms were so sensual in nature that she could never wear them in public. I knew they had to be made for her, custom ordered by a lover because they were very expensive. I quietly put it in my pocket to take with me because I wanted to get an appraisal of its value. It made Karen and Terry's suspicions seem credible. I went back to the office and was very quiet. When questioned about it, I just said I had a lot on my mind, and that was the truth. About 3 in the afternoon, when an office worker came to my office, I asked her to call the group my wife worked with and find out if she was taking on any new patients. "Jet, I'm happy to do that, but can I ask why?" Fiona asked. "For personal reasons, I need to verify my wife's actual work schedule," I said. I've heard some rumors that I need to prove false. And finally, someone with the guts to tell her what we've been hearing for months, Fiona said as she walked out the door. Fiona, Karen's sister, was a military widow who joined our company while her husband was serving. Now, she was raising her daughter alone. I'd often wondered why she couldn't find another man. Fiona was the complete opposite of her sister. She was a looker. Throughout our marriage, my wife was the only woman for me, but seeing what Fiona brought to the table in her femininity, I realized I was still young enough to start over. The freedom of knowing I had other options seemed to bring a calmness to my mental state. Even though I'd known her for years through Terry and Karen, I hadn't paid any attention. For some reason, I was experiencing the excitement of the unknown. To me, it was a sense of enlightenment. When she got back with the information, she provided me with quite a revelation. Her work schedule wasn't at all like what I'd been led to believe. Instead of working Thursday and Friday nights until 10, she only worked once a month like all the other doctors in their practice. Fiona and I talked for quite a while. She tried to ask questions without being obvious about what she was asking. I don't know if she realized it, but she planted some thoughts in me that gave me hope for my future. That left her a lot of unaccounted for time. It was shocking to find out she only worked half a day on Wednesdays. The question now was, what did she do with all that free time? 8 years ago, when the big storm took my mom, both my dad and I were surprised to learn that she'd left her here in the family business to me to be held in trust for her 3 grandchildren. When I was a kid, they'd sold off most of the farm for a good price to the corporation, leaving 10 acres around the house in their names and another 10 in my name. The company had paid off the mortgage in 10 years along with interest. They gifted the land to me as Lena and my wedding present. Lena and I used that land to build our house. My dad had been dealing with the pain of losing his wife and had withdrawn for a few months after that. At the time, I became the company president and my dad retired to become our first CEO. He still came in 3 mornings a week to keep up with things and acted as a consultant. I knew I had a big business trip coming up in a few weeks, requiring me to be at 8 different company offices to renew contracts, which required my signature. All of them were multi-year agreements with fixed prices for product lines, allowing us to raise costs. Because it was a 3-country trip, I'd be gone for at least 3 weeks. Both my father and I were still at the head of the company, which now employed over 100 people. We had over 48 greenhouses, all producing at maximum capacity. Thankfully, in my first year working full-time, I had property surveyed for an aquifer, and we found one that could supply everything we needed for years to come. When we cut the county water off at that time, we slashed our total expenses by $10,000 a month. Another bonus was we found a huge natural gas pocket, and because the land had been in the family for generations, we found that we still owned the mineral rights. After negotiating with the big guys, we were in the money. Even after paying for what we used for heat, we still received a hefty royalty payment from them every month. My cousin Terry, our CFO, came to my office to update me on the latest cash flow report, showing that we were experiencing our largest growth spurt to date. During the close of this, I revealed to him what I'd found. He was just as shocked as I was when he reviewed it thoroughly. "It seems like the man she's been seeing has a lot of money. What are you going to do about it, Jet?" Terry asked. "Are you going to send someone else to sign the contracts?" "No, I'm going to pretend like I don't know anything is going on," I said. "That'll give the private investigators I'm going to hire more time to figure out who my wife's lover is." Terry said, "Why wouldn't this make a difference in the divorce court, since this is a 50-50 state?" "So Lena's father, Leonard LeBlanc, was and still is a crafty son of a bitch," I said. "Before Lena and I got married, he made us negotiate a prenuptial agreement. I'm pretty sure Lena has forgotten all about it." "Why would he do that?" Terry said. "He's worth millions with his hydraulic fracturing methods." "To protect his daughter from me getting a portion of her inheritance," I said. "If we get a divorce because of adultery, the guilty party has to take their clothes, and that's it." There was a noticeable change in attitude when I got home that night. My wife seemed to have developed a respect for me that I hadn't seen in years. I think we both realized our relationship had drastically changed. Lena was definitely trying to figure out what I believed I knew. It was also interesting because that morning my dad decided to go fishing for 2 weeks with some of his childhood buddies. They'd been trying to convince him to do this for years, but he always had an excuse. He'd be gone until the day before I got back. During his absence, Lena was at home more. It seemed suspicious and gave me the feeling that something was going on in his life that he didn't want me to know. A few days later, my daughter called me and said that her mom was frantically looking for something she'd lost and had questioned all three of my kids about it. "Mom made us all go into your bedroom and search through her dresser drawers," Luna said. "Whatever she's looking for must be important to her because I think she was about to cry." When I got home that night, I asked Lena about it and she insisted it was nothing important. When I told her what our daughter had told me about it, Lena replied that our daughter must have misunderstood and she would clear things up with her after dinner. During dinner that night, I looked at her with the same look I used when I'd been teasing her when we were in high school. This time, her mood shifted abruptly and she became eerily quiet. I believed Lena now, believed I knew she was having an affair. After dinner, while she was putting the boys to bed, my daughter asked me what was going on. "Luna, I'm not really sure," I said. "I've been tipped off to something, and if it's true, things here are going to get a whole lot worse for a while because your mom and I are going to need some time to work things out. Just remember, this situation isn't because of anything you or your brothers have done." It had been 3 weeks since I found that bracelet with all the charms on it. The 16 charms on it were appraised at $8,000 each. The platinum used with the gold in the bracelet made the chain worth $20,000. Anyone giving that to her had commissioned one of the most famous jewelers in the jewelry business to make it. Because the individual charms were unique, they were bought to mark special moments or events in the two people's relationship. If you figure she was getting 2 charms a year, probably on her birthday and anniversary, that would figure out to about 8 years. I didn't want to believe it, but circumstantial evidence pointed to a direction I didn't even want to consider. That's why I'd rearranged my schedule to fit in a stop so I could get what I needed. I'd booked a hotel room in St. Louis so I could get the full report from the private investigators before continuing my business trip. That's when my fears were confirmed. My wife's lover for nearly 8 years was a man I'd known my entire life. It was my father. The private investigators gave me a written copy and a flash drive with everything stored on it. After the gentlemen left with their full payment in hand, I read through the entire printed report. It was so detailed, I didn't know how I didn't vomit. Thankfully, I had bought a few bottles of scotch from the duty-free shop on my way back from Canada, and I'd had more than a few stiff drinks while reading it. After mustering all my courage, I called Leonard LeBlanc, my soon-to-be ex-father-in-law, and asked him for his private email account. Leonard is a proud man who lives by his own set of values, and I hated what this report would do to him. However, I knew that if I didn't tell him the truth, he would help Lena ruin me in our divorce. "Why should I do that?" Leonard asked. "Because I want you to know before you hear it from someone else," I said. "Because you wouldn't believe me if you heard it from me. This is a file I was just given about 2 hours ago. I paid $6,000 to get it. After getting it, I sent it to him through my laptop and waited for the inevitable phone call. Leonard LeBlanc, when you first meet him, will appear to be the embodiment of Gomer Pyle. He's over 6 feet tall, but he's clumsy and awkward like they used to be. He was the son of a gator hunter growing up, whose dad got lucky and became wealthy. With his backwards way of acting in plain-spoken words, he looked like a fool. Many have been sent to the laundry because they underestimated the intelligence this man hid from most people. When he's interested in something, he'll go all in to investigate it from the bottom up. Many CEOs have been shocked when a very tough deal got signed that they'd hired him for 6 months to handle. When he took over a company, he found ways to improve both profit and productivity. Using their weaknesses against them, he was able to cut millions off their asking price. As soon as my cell phone rang, I answered it. As expected, it was my future ex-father-in-law. "Lordy, Jet," Leonard said. "You were right. If you'd told me, I would have called it. You're the biggest liar in this country. Just how bad is it going to get?" "I'm going to treat them the same way you treated them," I said. "There will be no mercy for either of them." "Don't blame the kid, son," he said. "I'll burn anyone to the ground for what they did. Just promise me that you won't do anything before we sit down and talk where what we say can't be recorded." Leonard LeBlanc is a devout man who's never been in a church a day in his life. He has his own views on life and what's right or wrong. Like it or not, you gotta respect the man for living his life by those views. Getting his support spoke volumes. "Dad, why don't we take the kids fishing the first Sunday after I get back?" I asked. You can call the girls tonight and arrange it if she's home." He laughed and said, "I like that. That way we'll kill two birds with one stone. One thing I need to know is what made you suspicious." "I found a bracelet with a bunch of charms on it. I got it appraised and found out it was custom made," I said. "The Monday before I was in Montreal, I arranged to have it sent to my wife from Paris, France. It'll be delivered one at a time to her work with a note saying I'll get in touch with you and your lover at an appropriate time, so you can know the price of my silence. She'll receive all 16 before I get home." "Lordy Jet, she's going to lose her mind, and so is he," Lena's dad said. "Why though?" "It gives me time to find a buyer for my stock in the company because I'm selling my father's dream," I said, "because that's the only thing that will hurt him as much as he hurt me. It'll throw them off balance mentally for a short while," I explained. "Their fear will become more evident as the day I get back gets closer." "How much longer is this trip of yours?" Leonard asked. "I've got another 2 weeks of living out of a suitcase," I said. "The day the first letter was delivered, they've become living dead." "It would be easier if they were dead," Leonard said. "Make it look like an accident." After he hung up, I felt a little comfort knowing that Leonard LeBlanc wouldn't wait on anyone. Being a man from the bayou, he knew how to take care of things in a way you didn't have to ask any questions. I was in the middle of New York City, staying at the Trump Hotel, and enjoying a great dinner at one of the many restaurants with some businessmen I'd been working with. Thankfully, I was heading home on Friday. I was still sitting at the table when the investigators came to me with some bad news. It was well past 9 at night. My father was dead. I was shocked. I had to ask what had happened. Apparently, after my wife had gotten drunk trying to drown her sorrows, there had been a gas explosion that blew out part of the house. She didn't make it out and was killed by the debris. I went in and asked if we could expedite the process because I needed to get a flight out as soon as possible. They understood, thankfully, and I ended up getting a better deal than I'd expected. I was lucky enough to catch the last flight to Cape that night. As I got off the 12-seater plane, I saw my father-in-law waiting for me. "My wife and I would like you and the grandkids to stay with us until everything is settled," Dad said. "It'll give you time to get things in order and settled." "How is Mom handling this?" I asked. "She's been holding up until the police informed us this afternoon that she was your father's longtime mistress," Dad said. "They corroborated their suspicions by finding the extortion notes that Lena had been receiving in your father's office." "That's interesting," I said. "I'm sure that's got them worried." "What's got them freaking out is finding the bracelet with the 16 different kinds of sensual charms, all in the nude," Dad added. "It's pretty much considered a pattern of what the lovers were doing. Of course they plan on talking to you after the funeral is over." "What do you suggest I do with that meeting?" I asked. "Just tell them the truth. Let the prenuptial agreement and the private investigators' reports do the talking for you. Give them to them right away. It'll prove you have no motive to frame them." I smiled because I knew he said that to remind me that all deaths, until proven otherwise, are considered suspicious. The more upfront I was with them, the less likely they'd be to conclude it was murder. Dad and I went together to the funeral director's office to pick out the caskets. We decided on sealed caskets for both of them. Then, I contacted Terry at the office to let him know the contracts were signed and I'd be taking a few days off. The funeral and tea for the couple were well attended. I thought my kids handled everything well. I tried to hold back as much as possible, but there were times when I broke. Most people believed the two were closer than normal, but nothing was mentioned publicly. The investigators waited respectfully until the fire marshal filed his final report on the cause of the gas explosion at my house. They ruled the explosion was caused by an installation error that happened while I was gone. I was informed that with this report, I could sue the gas company for wrongful death and loss of my house. So they didn't find anything that could determine when the gator had been put into the pond. I showed them the prenuptial agreement and the private investigator's report. Using my father-in-law's printer, I gave them a copy to take with them. They thanked me for revealing the information because it cleared up any outstanding questions they might have when others reviewed the final report and their ruling on the situation. Lena's dad and I were sitting on the back porch, having a couple of cold beers and reviewing my interview with the investigators, when he said, "My wife and I are changing our will, leaving everything to the kids in a lifetime trust managed by you until they turn 30. I want to know how I'm involved in what happened." "Dad, it's okay," I replied. "Karma gave them what they deserved, let it go." Leonard grinned and said, I always knew you were a smart one who knew exactly what to say when it needed to be said. My kids and I were at Macy's shopping for a whole lot of stuff when I ran into Fiona. We'd moved into my dad's house while they rebuilt mine. It was long overdue and he needed it badly. She'd volunteered to come over and help. Fiona, we're buying stuff because we don't have anything, I said. Let me introduce you to my 3 kids, Luna, Leon, and Levi. We decided to start with the boys. After finding out what the boys liked and didn't like, we got started. We bought enough underwear for 2 weeks. Next, it was t-shirts, blue jeans, dress shirts, jackets, and other types of clothing. As soon as we could, I paid for what we'd decided on and brought it out to the car. I made 6 trips to the car by the time we were finished, and I was exhausted. Dad, why doesn't Fiona come with us to the temporary house? The kid said. Then she can come back with you to help you buy new clothes. I don't want to leave your father with the impression that I'm butting into something that doesn't concern me, she said. Into a business that's not my business. Dad, Luna said quite emphatically, I think you should go with her and take her to dinner to show her how much we appreciate her help. So we did just that. After we dropped the kids off and unloaded all the stuff, we went back, and she helped me. In all, it took 4 hours, so I invited Fiona to dinner. After she agreed, I called Luna to ask her permission, then arranged it via cell phone to have their favorite pizza delivered. When I got back home, I was asked a big question. Dad, are you going to take her out on a date? And that, my friends, is a question that remains to be answered.